open the pod bay doors.
Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cinematic Traveler Podcast. I am your intrepid movie exploring host, Chris, and on this episode, I am going to be bringing you my review for the latest horror flick to hit the screens here in January, and that would be Companion, directed by Drew Hancock and starring Sophie Thatcher and Jack Quaid. And I have to let you know, I am so excited to be reviewing this movie. I remember when the first teaser trailer came out, it had me hooked, and I just could not wait to watch it. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. But before I do have to ask a favor of you. Whatever you're listening to the show on, somewhere on that screen is a follow button. If you could please hit that follow button, I would appreciate it. Subscribe to the show. It helps me and the show, but it also helps you because you won't miss any future reviews. And you can also go back and listen to previous episodes and hear my amazing reviews in my sexy, sexy voice. And please share the show with your friends, your family, your enemies. I don't care who you choose to unleash this show on, but I would appreciate it. You can also share the show on social media. I am on social media, so if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Cinematic Traveler Pod. I'm also on Twitter at CMT Pod, Blue Sky. That one is at Cinematic Traveler something. And I have an email address, thecinematictravelerpod@gmail.com. So you have plenty of ways to follow me and get in touch with me. So there, I got through all of that podcaster mumbo jumbo, quick, fast, and in a hurry, so we could dive into this episode. I hope you're doing great out there, my beloved listener. We are approaching the second month in this year. We have survived the first one. Of course, this month we know has that one day in it that most of us single people don't like, but we'll get to that when that day comes around. At any rate, I hope you're doing well out there. Wherever you are listening to me from, just know that I am not going to put any tariffs on you with my show. In fact, you have a tariff on my heart. Aw, isn't that sweet? It's all about love with this episode because of the topic of this movie, Companion. Now, before we get into the review, I do have to over-explain things as always. So I am going to be giving you a spoiler-free review as well as a spoiler-free plot synopsis. Now, in my plot synopsis, I have hidden two movie quotes that share some DNA or run parallel to this movie. Now, if you can identify those movie quotes and get in touch with me on those various means that I have given you at the beginning of the show, you get a point for each one that you get right. At the end of the month, I add up all the points, and whoever wins gets to pick a movie for me to review next month. So how about that? You have a little say in this show. That's not bad. Not bad at all. But if you don't want to participate in every episode, you can just play from time to time just to let me know you're out there and listening. I would appreciate that, as I am a lonely, lonely man sitting in my fort of blankets, providing you this free entertainment. As I mentioned, no tariffs. There will be no tariffs. I know. I hear you. Let's just get on with it already. I have to say, really quickly, this is going to be a difficult episode because I have struggled with whether or not something is a spoiler or not. And I'm going to get to some stuff at the end with the marketing of this movie because the trailer that I watched, the first trailer, did not reveal things. And that was the only one I watched. I will let you know when I go to these movies, because I go all the time because of the podcast. If I see a trailer for a movie I like the first time, I'm like, oh, that's really good. I tend to look away whenever that trailer comes back, or if they have another trailer, so I don't get anything spoiled for me. So I avoid as much of that as possible before I watch the movie because it makes it better. It does make it better. However, in this movie, after watching it and going back, I did find a trailer that does reveal some things. I've also, and this is another thing, I know I'm over-explaining things again, but I don't like to watch or listen to reviews before I do my reviews. However, with this one, I did check out a couple to see where people are lining up, if they're kind of spoiling things or not, or if this is a spoiler. And it seems like the couple that I watched is sort of split down the middle. So I'm going to go spoiler-free on this episode. I'm not going to give away any big reveals. If you've watched that trailer, the second trailer, or if you have seen the movie, you'll understand some of the things I'm trying to say, but just bear with me as I kind of tap dance through this minefield. I know. I'm sorry. I over-explained again. That's twice in one episode. I've done too much over-explaining. Let's get into this movie. Again, the movie is Companion, directed by Drew Hancock, and I looked down his IMDb, and this is the only film of his that I've seen. I don't know that he's done another one. I noticed a lot of television work and stuff. So, at any rate, this is my first foray into his filmography. So, we start the movie with a narration from Iris, played by Sophie Thatcher, telling us about the first time that she met Josh, played by Jack Quaid. Then we witness the two having your typical romantic movie first meeting in a grocery store, and it's love at first sight. Well, then we jump to present day as Josh and Iris are driving to a friend's remote house in this beautiful mountain area. Now, Iris, she's a bit nervous about being around these friends for reasons. But Josh, he just tells her, hey, be yourself. You're charming, you're lovely, you're beautiful. Everybody just has their own issues. You just be yourself. And naturally, she says something to the effect of, as you wish. Hint, hint, because she loves him so much. Now, in the house, we meet the owner, Sergei, a suspicious Russian, played by Rupert Friend, and his mistress, Kat, played by Megan Surrey. We also meet the other couple that is hanging out with them this weekend, Eli, played by Harvey Gillian, I think that's how you say his last name, from What We Do in the Shadows, and his boyfriend, Patrick, played by Lucas Gage. Now, Kat is the one who has some issues with Iris, and Sergei, he is a bit interested in her, maybe a little too much, but Eli and Patrick, they're just there for fun. Patrick is an excellent chef, so he's cooking up some meals, and of course, Eli's throwing down the booze, and they're dancing around and having a good time. Well, after the first night of partying, everyone's a bit hungover, except for Iris, and she decides to go spend some time at this nearby lake when Sergei shows up, and he begins to do some unwanted advances onto our hero, the lovely Iris. Well, things escalate quickly, and eventually Iris has to defend herself and kill Sergei. This is when we learn there is a little more to Iris than meets the eye. We also learn there is more going on with Josh and some of the people in the cabin that is more than meets Iris, I guess, causing her to question their relationship and eventually saying something like, I'm not crying because of you, you're not worth it. I'm crying because my delusion of who you were was shattered by the truth of who you are. So there are twists and turns that I am not going to give away, but ultimately, will this chaotic trip end the love of Iris for Josh, or will she fall for his toxic ways again? As I mentioned, I shall not spoil anything in this movie, but I will give you the best review for Companion in all the podcast universe, nay, in all of the universe. So if you are new to the show or haven't listened in a while, I do break my reviews down into 3 segments: the good, the bad, and the nitpicky. The good is the stuff that works for me in the movie. The bad is obviously stuff that doesn't. And the nitpicky, these are things that are neither good nor bad. Sometimes it's Hollywoodisms, or sometimes it's just silly things my weird little brain picks up on that make me laugh. And as I am trying to do with this podcast, I'd love to make you laugh, because if there are 2 things I like to do in this world, that is to get involved in toxic relationships. And maybe those 2 things go hand in hand. All right, let's go ahead and move into the good of Companion. And let's start with the performances. I have to say, this cast does an amazing job through this movie. I know this is January, and I have suffered through some terrible movies leading up to this, so maybe that taints a little bit of my review here. But I did enjoy everybody's performance. The movie rests on Sophie Thatcher's shoulders as she plays Iris. And this is going to be tough because, like I said, I don't want to give too much away. But I like that she really has a bunch of different things to do in this movie. Oh, God, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. Oh, I should have just done spoilers. All right. Let's challenge myself here. She does play the doting, loving girlfriend to Josh very well. She's smitten with him. Every time she looks at him, she has that, that look where she's just in heaven to be around him. And everything he does, she is just waiting on, pins and needles to see what she should respond with or how she should act in this loving girlfriend way. So she does convincingly sell that, which does lean into what is more about her. And once you find out what it is, then we get into some things where you start to look back and go, okay, I get things that I missed in her performance that should have tipped me off. Oh God, I know I cannot spoil this stuff, but yeah, there are things early on that I kind of noticed in her performance, and then when it was revealed, I was like, oh, that's pretty good how she did this certain thing here and how she said this way. Yeah, it was pretty smart. But then that leads to this whole different character that she has to play, because she kind of learns more about Josh and who he is and these people that she's around. And she has to react to this crazy situation that's going on that has evolved from all this chaos over the weekend. And you really root for her throughout the whole movie. And it's sort of a character arc where she starts as that docile girlfriend and becomes, I don't want to say girl boss, but she becomes a badass by the end of the movie for reasons. And you're really rooting for her by the end of the movie. The next performance that really is important in the movie is Jack Quaid as her boyfriend Josh. I like Jack Quaid. I know he's a nepo baby, but he's one of the good ones because he will say yes, he is a nepo baby, and he got a lot of opportunities that most don't. If you don't know, he is the son of Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan, and he has hit the DNA jackpot, especially with that smile. If you know Dennis Quaid when he was young, that smile he has, well, Jack Quaid has it now. I'm sure that doesn't hurt him in any way in his romantic life, but he could pull that smile off and be very charming. And in this movie, he plays sort of the good boyfriend. At least that's what you think at first. And again, I don't want to give things away, but as you learn more about him and what's going on in this house out in the woods, you see the negative side of him, especially really when you get to the end. It gets very, I don't know, I almost spoiled it. It gets very rough towards the end of the movie where you're like, I don't like this guy, because he does a really great job early on selling you that, hey, he's just this cool guy who loves his girlfriend and he's happy to be out here with his friends. And at the same time, when things sort of get out of hand with what's going on, you kind of understand why he's struggling with that. He's not this brilliant guy. He is just an average dude in this situation that seems to be getting worse and worse. And then he eventually takes it out on poor Iris. And obviously that's the main dynamic of this movie. But the rest of the cast, I really enjoy. Megan Suri as Kat. She plays Sergei's mistress, and she just does not like Iris. And there's sort of more behind her. And she's kind of bitchy sometimes, so she's kind of lovable and hateable at the same time. I think Lucas Gage as Patrick and Harvey Gillian as Eli, they make a nice couple, and you can see that they're really in love. And they have their little romantic story about how they met and everything. And then you have Sergei, played by Rupert Friend, who is this Russian that is playing up to Russian stereotypes that may or may not be true. But I think everybody in the cast, again, it's a small cast, but I think they all play well off of each other, and they add little things to their characters to make them either likable or hateable that you like, if that makes sense. You know, you love to hate them, I guess, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think top to bottom, all the performances are really well done in this movie. I think it's well directed. Again, this is Drew Hancock's, I don't know if this is his first feature film, but this is the first movie of his. I've seen a lot of stuff I looked at was in TV, but he does a really good job here. I think it's well paced. It starts a little slow, but it's kind of setting things up for when you get the reveal. When you get that reveal, then it just goes off the rails as far as what's happening on the screen. Not in a bad way, but in a good way. It's just one bad thing leads to another bad thing. But you get that good setup so you kind of understand Iris as a character and Josh, who you think they are, so that when things change, it plays with that at the beginning of the movie. So, like I said, when things happen, the movie has some fun with you and what you have as these preconceived ideas. And this is a horror movie, I guess. They say it is. It feels more like a thriller with some gore in it. But it also is a comedy. And there are some pretty funny moments in the movie, some of which lead to the direction. There's really a great hard cut in this movie, no pun intended, between this moment between Iris and Josh where she's just talking about how much she loves him, and then it just cuts to him making his O face, and I can't describe it and give it justice, but it made me laugh out loud. There's a few moments in this movie that do that, but again, going back to the direction, he also wrote this movie. It does a good job of not having the comedy invade the thriller or the horror or the story of the movie, if that makes sense. There's scenes in here that are very emotional and have a lot of impact, and they don't throw in a funny line just to have a funny line. Like, all the comedy plays naturally throughout the movie. Some of it is obvious, and some of it's just some dialogue where you're like, huh, that's pretty funny how they said that. But ultimately, it never encroaches on the horror or the thriller part of the movie. And that's good balance that this movie really needed to have. And that, like I said, that sits at Drew Hancock's feet because he is the director and the writers. But overall, I think the movie works well as far as the direction and the pacing and how it looks and the way it sort of balances all the comedy and the horror thriller elements and the deep philosophical questions that you have throughout the movie, which is another positive movie. It does ask more questions than you would think a movie like this would. However, again, it doesn't, like the comedy, it doesn't bog down in these things. You don't have these moments in the movie where you ponder it and everybody's questioning things and bring up. It just sort of lets these questions arise and lets you think about things in the movie and how you would react to things, about, you know, how we feel about love and how our brains are wired and what emotions mean to people. And if they're programmed into us, then that's the way we feel. Or if the emotion doesn't feel the way we think it should, but it's still strong, does that mean that it's love? Also, you get into things, and I don't think this is spoiling anything, I already mentioned it, but ends up being a very toxic relationship. I will say, and I was going to bring that up in my gore score, as this is a horror movie, that there's some stuff here at the end that gets pretty brutal. So maybe if you've been in an abusive relationship, you might want to have some caution watching this movie, because, yeah, Josh gets pretty mean with Iris towards the end of the movie. But again, it sort of plays into this, what is love? What is a relationship? Is there such thing as this Hollywood love, or is it all just people manipulating people and using people and getting their own way or getting what they want out of you? And there's also some questions that I can't really talk about in this movie without giving things away, that again play into what does it mean to have emotions. How about that? And then my final positive of this movie, oh, bless you, Drew Hancock. This movie is right at about an hour and a half long. It's absolutely perfect in that regard. As I mentioned with the pacing, it moves along at a pretty good pace. So once everything starts to hit and you get all these reveals and you understand the setup at the beginning of the movie, it just flies on by. Again, there's some other stuff I forgot to talk about. They have some flashbacks in this movie that are pretty good too, where it tells a story that they'll flashback at one point and then they'll have a different version of the story and flashback to show you this different version. So again, hour and a half movie, you know I'm going to give love to that, especially a horror type movie, and one that it never gets boring or never bogs down, and you never get any like pretentiousness out of it. It's just a thriller that has ideas that if you want to talk about them or question them, you can. So let's go ahead and move into the negative or the bad of the film. And I know I mentioned it earlier. I don't know if this being a movie that came out right at the end of January has affected me because of all the garbage I've watched, but I struggled to find some negatives in this movie. I think really there's only about two that I'll try to elaborate on. And as much as the movie does ask deeper questions or has these themes to them, it does feel very familiar. I mean, we've seen movies that question what exactly love is, and we've seen movies about toxic relationships. We've also seen movies about Iris and who she is, as it were, and the questions that brings up. So I never really felt like this was a wholly new idea of the movie. It felt like someone taking pieces of other movies, not in a negative way. I know this is in a negative section, but not in a negative way, because it makes a very good movie. But it does feel familiar. You don't feel like, oh, this is an amazing new way to look at things. You're like, okay, I've seen all of this stuff before. You also, as it is kind of sort of a horror movie, you have some horror tropes throughout. You have some conveniently placed knives here and there or weapons that just appear and save the day. There's also a gun that goes off at an appropriate time. And while the main characters, I think, are really good throughout the movie, there's a couple of very minor secondary characters that are kind of dumb because they have to be dumb, if that makes sense, to make the movie go. Basically, plot be plotting. So yeah, that sort of wraps up my negative for the film. I don't think there was much to it. At an hour and a half long, I didn't think we have a lot of time to dwell on anything that was really negative. There are a few things that I could bring up, but they would spoil the movie. Just God, I don't want to say it. I guess just the way things worked, I was like, I don't know if Iris would still be that way. All right, anyway, I don't want to give things away, but for the most part, that's the only real negatives I found for the movie. So we'll move into the nitpicky. And again, these are, well, outside of one thing, these aren't really good or bad, just Hollywoodisms or silly things I pick up on. My first nitpick, and this is something I think the real world needs to do. And in this movie, everybody has these electric self-driving cars. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, as I mentioned, they're driving out to this house, Josh and Iris, and they're in the car and they talk to the car like, thank you, car, open the door, all that stuff. And it's just this generic computer voice. And I can't help it. And for all of you Arnold fans out there that have watched Total Recall, why can they not make an electric car that has a voice that sounds like Johnny Cab? Come on, give me some Johnny Cab. Hope you enjoyed the ride. I would buy a car just if it sounded like that. Where to? I'm not familiar with that address. Hope you enjoyed the ride. Yes, that's how my brain works. I am too far gone into these movies. And that leads me to my next negative of this movie is, how romantic did they make it all look, right? They have, and I know it plays into this movie about what they're setting up, but it's always, I've mentioned they meet in this grocery store and it's love at first sight and something happens and they have this instant chemistry. And I think Eli and Patrick, they have a similar story where they meet at this party and it's like, oh, why can't it be like that? They just sell it. Maybe that's why I'm perpetually single, because I have this movie mentality of what love is that has corrupted my brain. I can honestly say I think in my life I've only really truly felt in love twice. Once when I was in college and that didn't work out, and then not too long ago with a woman I never even got to date. So they don't show that in the movies at all. No, they don't show the heartache that comes from that. Yeah, fucking Hollywood. But again, as I was watching the movie, I was like, oh, I just wish it was like that. It would be so wonderful. And my last nitpick for this film, and this one I've touched on already, and I do think this is a negative for this film, and I don't know why they do this stuff, but as I mentioned, I go to the movies a lot, obviously, because of the show. Even if I didn't have the show, I'd still probably go a lot. But at any rate, you see a lot of trailers. And when I first saw the teaser trailer for this movie, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. You got me. I'm going to go see this movie because I don't know what the fuck's going on. And that's the way I like it. I want to go into a movie with as little knowledge as possible. Well, as I mentioned, after I saw this movie, trying to decide what is a spoiler and what isn't, I saw the second trailer. And the second trailer spoils half the damn movie. And I don't know why they do that, because it kind of ruins this movie, because it's such a nice little twist that me not knowing when it did happen, I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And it helps with the performance from Sophie Thatcher, because you're like, oh, okay, she was doing this because of that. Well, when you show all that stuff in a trailer, now there's no suspense, there's no surprise, there's no, oh, that was amazing. And I don't know why they have to do that. Why do they have to ruin it in the trailer? Do they think we're so dumb that we won't go see a movie because we don't know what's going to happen? It seems like the best trailers are the ones where you just get little pieces of information and that's enough. So yeah, I would strongly, strongly recommend, if you have not watched any trailers, or if you've only seen that first trailer that doesn't really give anything away, avoid anything at all. I wouldn't listen to other reviews, because as I mentioned, the couple that I listened to, one of them stayed away from it and one of them did talk a little about what's going on, and they were both supposed to be spoiler free. So I don't really know what the line is with this particular movie, because as I mentioned, the trailer does give things away. So my final nitpick, negative, whatever you want to call it, is Hollywood, please stop showing us the whole movie in these damn trailers. So before I get to my final recommendation, as this is a quote-unquote horror movie, and I tend to forget about doing this. I meant to start this every time I have a horror movie, but I just keep forgetting about it. But I am going to give you a gore score. This will be my only number rating between 1 and 5, 1 being no or very little gore, and 5 being something like Terrifier 3, where there's blood and body parts everywhere. This one for me falls in at a 2. There are some bloody scenes. There are a few nasty moments in this film that will make you cringe or look away from the screen. And I did mention there's some stuff at the end with Josh and Iris that if you've been through a abusive relationship, you might not like watching that stuff. So be careful with that. But other than that, yeah, I would give it probably a 2. It's not super over the top, but there are a few moments where there is some blood, baby. There is some blood. So overall, my final verdict for this film, if you couldn't tell, I did enjoy it. I recommend going to watch it in a movie theater, especially if you don't know what's going on. Well, even if you do, it's still a fun ride. There's some twists in there that even that second trailer didn't give away. So I would definitely recommend watching it. It's a good combination of, God, I hate to say horror, but more of a thriller with a little bit of comedy and some dark humor in it, and some excellent performances. And I swear, after the last few weeks of movies, it's nice to see something competently written and directed and acted that is breezy to watch. Like I said, it's an hour and a half long, so you're not wasting a whole lot of your life, and you'll enjoy it. And by the end, yeah, you'll definitely be rooting for Iris, and you'll be hating on old Jack Quaid. Damn you, Jack Quaid. I hope Homelander gets you. At any rate, yeah, I strongly recommend watching this movie. I can't wait for it to come on streaming so I can watch it again. Hell, I might go and see it in the movie theaters again. It was that enjoyable of an experience. It was just a fun ride. And again, it has messaging in there, but it doesn't overpower you. It just is there. And you can enjoy the film for what it is and then ask questions about it, or just enjoy it and then forget all about it and move on with your life. So yeah, I say definitely go out and check out this movie and have a good time with it. Of course, I will tell you fellas out there, if you're bringing your date, she might look at you side-eye by the end of the movie. She'd be like, you kind of remind me of Jack Quaid in this movie, you little bastard. That's not on me. That's not on me. That's on the filmmaker. So that wraps up my review for Companion. And if you're still listening, I must have done something right. Again, if you could please follow, subscribe to the show, I greatly appreciate it. Leave me a review. Get in touch with me. Let me know your thoughts on the movie. Did I do a good enough job sort of tap dancing around the spoilers here? Or if you saw it, maybe you want to talk spoilers, you can do that with me as well. I will let you know the other podcast I am on, Just Go Watch. We are going to be doing a review for this movie that will be spoiler heavy. I think that's coming out in the middle of the week. So if you want to tune into that to hear my thoughts a little more detailed, then check that out. Also, I will be back towards the middle of the week with my streaming surprise review, and I am excited about that because I got the movie picked out. I just got to watch it, so it ought to be a lot of fun to talk about that movie. And then I will be finishing the week on Friday with my final Star Trek movie review with Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. So I'll finally be wrapping up that marathon session. So you're going to get plenty of opportunities to hear my sexy voice as we go through the week. And I do appreciate you tuning in to listen to my voice and listen to my show. I tell everyone I know I've got the smartest and sexiest audience in all the podcast universe, and you never fail to live up to those high standards. Now, as you are traveling around on this blue and green ball, bouncing through the cosmos, I need you to do one thing for me. Go out there and do that voodoo that you do so well. Punch it!